What job should marketing get done in a business?
The way I have come to look at this now, and I can credit Sam Shepler for the line, but it's really informing how I look at things now, is I think the future of marketing and the job marketing really needs to get done is it's a transference of trust. I think the job marketing has is to get the right people to not only see the value in what you have to offer, but to believe it and to believe in the brand and to believe that you can do what you promise. It's framing things up in a way that connects and is believable and can be trusted so that they feel confident in taking action, in making a decision. So I would say the job marketing needs to do is creating this transference of trust from brand to consumer.
That's Joel Klettke, the previous co-founder of Case Study Buddy, a true master of creating effective case studies. But more than that, he has a clarity on what marketing is, the job it should get done, that is not only educational, but also inspiring. Before we get back into the conversation, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show where we explore what marketing is. My aim is assisting you in improving how you think about marketing, not telling you what to think about marketing. It's October 23rd, 2024. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. All opinions shared in this podcast are the individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associated organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional marketing guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here. Has that always been marketing's job, or have you seen that change with more companies vying for that trust and attention, or has it always been about that trust?
As people get more and more access to information, I think the role of marketing changes. And as people change the way that they buy, I think that the role of marketing changes. I think marketing's a bit like an elephant in that, that whole, three blind men and an elephant where one's grabbing the leg and one's got the tail and one's got the trunk, and they're all telling a different truthful story about what this thing is, but they don't have a whole grasp on it. I think that's what's kind of interesting, and obviously for you in this podcast, you get a lot of different blind men and women's grasp on what this thing is. But for me, I think early on, marketing's big job was awareness and to make people aware of the fact that this thing existed. It's not that consumers weren't discerning, it's just I think they had fewer options and fewer reasons to doubt, or at least fewer obvious reasons to doubt. And I do think that's kind of evolved and changed. We still have the same hardware between our ears. We still make decisions the same way people, made decisions a long time ago. The difference is the access to information and how we go about evaluating options, and we still turn to peers. We still, do our own research to some extent. But I think for where we're at now in history, in the advent of AI and saturation of markets and a huge distrust in corporations and big bodies, I think there has been a shift to making it all the more important to not only own your piece of the market, but to defend it by being trustworthy, being believable, helping people see the value and believe that you can actually do what you're promising. So I think that aspect's always been there. It's just right now we're grasping a different part of the elephant and maybe prioritizing that a little more.
So in the work you've done, how does that look? How do you build trust, or how did you do that with your previous company?
Yeah, I think even before Case Study Buddy, when I was really focused on conversion copywriting, a big part of that is empathy. It's understanding how people evaluate and what are they really looking for and what motivates them so that we can tap into those underlying things and build trust on their level. It's not just about making a compelling promise, it's about making the most compelling promise you can actually keep. So, starting there, building that empathy, you have to have that to do your job. And then with Case Study Buddy, we were really focused on that second piece, which is the evaluation and honest assessment of peers. How do we go beyond kind of the boilerplate case study, the very self-serving back patty, look at us and all the great work we've done? How do we kind of transform this medium into something that is more believable, that can convey and communicate that trust and not betray it? And that was really interesting, putting the stories of customers front and center, letting them be the advocates, letting their experiences speak, and creating a whole environment around that where it was possible to make that happen, because a lot of even customers will have their guard up and be reticent to go on the record. That's, that was our whole world for the time that I was running, that company, and that work continues now that it's been purchased. So, I've always, I think, been in the mix of this trust element, just in different ways.
I like how you pull empathy, because I think a huge issue with some marketing is this delusion or this lack of empathy. Somewhat our audience, whether we say it or not, is almost stupid. So what I can put out that would never work on me, or to your point, that typical structure of a case study, even though I would never buy from reading it, we still do it on repeat. How do you think about how to actualize empathy, which could be a very long conversation?
You have to talk to people. You have to be in the weeds and observe and listen. And so both in Case Study Buddy and in my work on the conversion copywriting side, a huge part of the job is just observing and asking and listening. People think that copywriting especially is about crafting the best line or writing the most compelling slogan. I think Don Draper, I love the guy, but I think he set copywriting back 100 years, because it's not about locking yourself in an office and looking for this flash of brilliance and trying to, well, how can I think and be in this person's shoes without ever actually going and talking to them to see, what shoes are they wearing. And so I think that's what it really comes down to, is you have to know how to ask, you have to know how to listen, and then you have to be honest in that storytelling. And the quickest way to kill, a customer story is, for example, to make the customer look like an idiot. They're not a dude or, a damsel or dude in distress. They're a person with agency who made a wise decision to get an outcome that they were motivated to get. So it really comes down to understanding, again, what matters to these people? How do they prioritize? How do they make decisions? What are their hopes and dreams and fears when it comes to, both their job and in life? And when you can bring those things together, and when you can borrow from these conversations and really communicate your value in their words and not in your own, I think that's where that empathy comes in. Because, what a CTO needs to see to believe in a product is very different from what a CMO needs to see. What an end user needs to see can be very different from both. And so understanding who you're trying to appeal to and what ultimately they care about, I think that's really core to the entire thing, because you can write a really fantastic, sounding or film a really great looking video that completely misses the point, because you're speaking to the wrong values or the wrong outcomes or the wrong KPIs or the wrong goals. So knowing who you're talking to and, again, talking to them first, I think becomes really core to the whole thing.
I love how you touch on that quote, which I think I've seen, of locking yourself in a room. I've heard that, and I've made my own claims that some of the best marketers observe very well, almost like comedians, how they can go out in the world and the same things at which just I don't note or I don't observe, they observe, and they create an entire joke or story out of. What gets in the way of, it's like curiosity is where my mind is going to. It's kind of this suspending judgment. I might know who the customer is, but I'm going to suspend that, ask the questions, observe. What gets in the way of that? What gets in the way of us being curious? What gets in the way of us building trust, even to take it just to the highest level? What are some of those things? You mentioned one of those with case studies being specifically positioning the person as a damsel in distress, which to your point is very valid. But what else comes to your mind for inhibitors to trust building or empathy?
Yeah, I think we get too complacent. I think there's a lot of pressure in the working world to move quickly and make decisions. I think it's unpopular to say we need to pause and we need to think and we need to talk to people. And even when there's a desire to talk to customers, there's a lack of understanding what that actually means. It's not just going and asking opinions or whatever. It's how do we try to, there's a great book on this called How to Know a Person. How do we try to see people for more than what they are? How do we avoid this whole idea of stacking, where we take one trait of that person, classic example, they're a Republican, oh, they're Democrat, We have a tendency, because that's, again, I talked about earlier, the hardware between our brains, it's inherent. We have heuristics because over the course of human evolution, they've been helpful in keeping us from getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers and whatnot. So we have to overcome our nature a little bit to not leap to snap judgments and to remain curious. And so I think there's this natural pressure again with time. There's complacency that comes from experience, thinking that we know something just because we've been around it so long. And it's kind of like that Dunning-Kruger effect, like the less somebody knows, the more they think they know. But conversely, the more somebody has been in a space and been allowed to be successful in that space for a long time without having to question beliefs, the less they think they need to. The more they think that the past predicts the future, which is not always the case. Part of it's inherent, part of it's the pressures of the workplace, and part of it is just curiosity is, I believe, a habit. It's a conscious effort to ask the questions and bring yourself out of the mindset of I know, I believe, I need to act. It's forcing yourself to pause and zoom out and say, what if, or could this be, or what would it mean if, and ask those uncomfortable questions, and being open to the idea, which our brains say, to being wrong. We don't like being wrong. Biologically, our brains don't like being wrong. So we have to work to get past that. So, even people with good intentions struggle with this. I've struggled with this in running my own company. Like, that's where that fresh perspective really helps. Someone coming in from the outside with that new energy or that new way of looking at things. And for younger marketers, especially coming to the field, like, that's an asset you have, is the ability to ask stupid questions and challenge assumptions. Might make people a little frustrated with you, but it's a fast lane to good insight.
In better marketing or whatever is being created at that point. I like how you touch on those internal, the kind of way that we've been created to not enjoy things that aren't true, all these facts, and then these external pressures as well from the company, from the person who says pause. Nobody enjoys that. I love that you kind of bring it up. And then the final piece of curiosity is a habit. Like, every time you do it, it becomes a bit cheaper the next time. And it never, like, until you start doing it, it's not going to be something you instantly do. And I think the political season we're currently in right now is that space. It's like, it's really hard if you haven't been curious when someone gives a different point of view, just to like be like, why do you believe that? What makes you, rather than being like, you're wrong and you're going to destroy America with your opinion. It seems that curiosity, to your point, is a habit that becomes easier the more we do it, or more naturally we more instinctual, maybe is a better word.
Again, like, we expect curiosity to just be this innate thing that we can tap into all the time. But just like, like any habit, an eating habit, an exercise habit, a reading habit, there's a conscious effort that has to go in. And a big part of habits too is environment. Do you put yourself in a position to have your ideas challenged? Do you put yourself in a position to observe with fresh eyes what people are doing? Do you get out of your desk chair and go talk to folks, or go spend time with people who aren't like you? And at this point, especially with the pandemic, those types of things, we've been given all the tools we need to create our own echo chambers and bubbles. And big, even in companies, there's a lot of safety in agreement and being a yes man or a yes woman or what have you. So there's a real risk to curiosity too. And I think that's part of what keeps people out of it, is because when you're the person saying this maybe isn't correct, or this might not be right, or we should really explore this, the people who think they know are always going to push back on that. And so, there's a real cost in energy and time to being curious too.
I love how you touch that. One final question in the marketing sphere. What is something, and maybe it's 1 to 2 years, or maybe even your whole career, that you've changed your mind on in marketing?
Yeah, the best product doesn't always win. There's a lot of people that say, the best marketing is having the best product. Part of my background is in music. I was in bands and played, and like, I can say with full conviction, like, the best bands aren't the ones who always make it. A lot of it does come down to, you can have a brilliant product, but if you expect that to be the difference and to be the only reason people choose you, you're in for a rough ride. I think the more saturated and noisy things get, and the more talented the workforce, and the more tools bring the bar down in terms of making, I think a great product is table stakes. If you want to be a world beater, you have to have great marketing. It's, Coke didn't win because they were the tastiest. Coke won because they had an absolute ton of marketing push, and they continue to, even as one of the biggest, brands, most recognizable brands in the world. So a great product is not enough. Never going to be enough.
I love it. All right. I think it's time to journey into the messiness of life, even though marketing can seem quite messy at times as well. So, Joel, first question, what is the purpose? What progress should we be trying to make in life? What's the purpose of life?
Obviously a big and tough question, and one that, again, I think it's like the elephant. Everyone can have a different and totally, valid opinion on. I think, to color my context, like I'm a dad of three. I've spent a lot of my life prior to that on my own pursuits and trying to build an empire and be somebody. And so for me, I think the purpose of life is to serve and make the path a little bit easier for others. We've really lost in the past decade, especially, this whole thing that makes us human, which is community and connection and empathy. And, it's easy to hide behind a screen. It's easy to chase dollars or empires, or, but at the end of the day, that stuff, it's all sandcastles and waves. It's all going to go. All we really have, I think, while we're alive anyways, is the right now and the people around us and the relationships we build. And so if you're in a position to make that path just a little bit easier, if you're in a position to give someone else a leg up or alleviate some pain or create an opportunity, that's where I think I'm seeing purpose and meaning now.
I love how you started with serve. I've rarely heard that from people, but from my background in Christianity or just a follower of Christ, obviously that's a huge tenet of Christ Jesus. I did not come to be served, but to serve. And I find that lacks today. It's more of what can I get than what can I give. And I'm working through my own challenge of being a taker to a contributor. What was it for you that changed? I mean, obviously it could be gradual, or it could be this achievement that you got and it just was like, this isn't it. Like, this doesn't give me the oomph or the kind of feeling I thought. Or was it more of this gradual over time? You've had 3 children that it just became clear of like, it's to serve and make that path easier for others. And through that, it slowly emerged.
I think as you get older, and whether you have kids or not, I think there's a realization of how temporary everything really is. And a recognition, I have a lot of really successful friends. I'm grateful for that. But even people that I really look up to who have achieved the things that, it doesn't mean that I lack ambition or that I don't still want some of those things for myself. But I think at the same time, you can see people who've built the thing, they've done the thing, they've achieved. You're always on someone else's rung. You're always looking up. It's very, very difficult to define what enough is for anyone. And the trouble is, the more you fill it, the tougher it gets to define that, again, it's a sliding scale. And so I think when I reflect on the things that have been most fulfilling, the things that have made me happiest, it's the cliche that all of us here, none of us want to believe, I think, but most of it has to do with the times that I have helped or trained or lifted someone else up or made something possible for someone else. And I still get a lot of joy out of personal achievement. And there's still a buzz that comes with getting on a stage or hitting a financial milestone or that kind of thing. But when I am dead, that's not going to matter. And the people around me aren't going to remember me for the business or the bank account. The people that will show up to your funeral will be the ones that you served or the ones that you connected with. And I think because purpose is kind of a uniquely human thing, I don't think, tigers don't worry about what their purpose is. Cheetahs don't question, what am I around for? I think because purpose is a uniquely human thing, that's where purpose lives on, is in the hearts and minds of people. And, how do you influence the hearts and minds of people? I think you serve them, you help them. I think it's something that as I've gotten older and as I've had to, having kids is a big reality check. You're a servant by default at least if you want to be a good parent. It's something that I think comes with age and experience, and just you kind of have to achieve sometimes some of the things you were going after to realize like, this is good. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the end. It's not the be all end all.
Yeah, sometimes you can climb the ladder to realize, as Thomas Merton stated, I didn't want to climb this wall, but I'm at the top of it and I'm able to see other walls around, and maybe I want to put my ladder against a different wall. But I don't think it's being young, right? I don't know if you need to climb that to the top. I think I was able to, or many others like me, kind of look around and be like, wait a second, some reason, something within me, it just doesn't make sense that I'll keep climbing this ladder, whether that be success, money. For me, and correct me here or just add on to this thought, I go to infinite versus finite. There's this book, a 1980 book by James P. Carsey, that writes about this. And Simon Sinek took his idea and then wrote a recent book about it. But it's all about this finite mindset or infinite mindset. In my mind, I can't help but believe that when you create a path for others, when you serve and help, you're in an infinite mindset, because that then ripples out forever. Giving someone access to something helps their whole family, all generations, versus a finite mindset focuses on how can I win? How do I win? And usually it's about gathering of self, gathering of material. But that's a finite game because that doesn't help infinitely. It doesn't, like, what are your thoughts on that? Whether you've heard of that concept of infinite and finite, or just in general, does that concur with you, or do you see holes maybe in that?
No, I think I'd agree. I think, again, the challenge is just that we have, especially in Western society, like, we're encouraged to consume, and we're encouraged to, again, be somebody or achieve something. And it's not that these things are wrong, but one is a limited number. Selfishness in any relationship quickly leads to ruin for that relationship, right? And yet we live our lives selfishly. I think, what's in it for me? What can I do? What can I achieve? What can I create for myself? And yeah, when you look at what can I create for others, or how can I make life easier? How can I make the path a little lighter? How can I help someone else? There's something different and lasting to that, to be able to see the impact you've had, the change you've made possible, like the course that you've maybe played a role in shifting for somebody else. And to me, that's a lot more gratifying than just endlessly scaling the wall, right? Again, we all talk about, growing up in the church as well, we all talk about servitude, and it kind of gets an eye roll, I think, from a lot of people growing up, or again, we pay lip service to it and don't ultimately play it out. But I think that's where happiness lives. Happiness is an emotion you share, and you pass on.
And through sharing, or just love in its sense, there's a sacrificing of self, this joining of two, where you can't keep your selfishness, or it isn't love then. And I love how you touch, though, on this fact of the Western society, or maybe society at large, where there's this quote, and I forget the phrasing exactly, but it's like, there's no good in being adjusted to a sick society. Like, there's no like proudness in being adjusted with a society that is, quote unquote sick. So I think maybe that's like rooted why it's so challenging, or why it becomes a platitude and not an actual action, is everything within us and everybody around us is playing this me game. So like, when you start to kind of take a step out, you can feel like you're getting taken advantage of, and I felt some of those things, because when I look around, it's a very uncommon phrasing to actually see someone serve, not to say in the kind of on the mountaintop, but actually in the valley, to actually serve. So I love how you point out that it's like kind of a community, it's a society-esque thing that kind of pulls us away from dying to self, and finding meaning in helping others, which, to be honest, helps yourself, because I am you, you are I. But obviously that gets into like very deep spiritual concepts. But again, though, for me, it helps because I'm either bringing heaven or hell to earth by the way I help or the way I use people. So I like that you went there.
Yeah, I mean, to simplify it even more, like, when you're serving yourself, it's only addition. When you serve others, it's multiplication. What's the faster way to grow a number? If we bring it just down to basic math, you get further with compounding interest than you do with just adding. So I think, service gives you the ability to multiply.
That's beautiful. One final question, Joel, to wrap up this podcast. With everything changing, especially with AI and just so much going on in our world, what do you hope in 10, 15 years is the same? Or maybe we lost it through the pandemic, but something like closely to us, what do you hope stays in the future or doesn't change?
There are a few things I think about the current climate I would protect. I think there's a lot of damage we've done. And the entire, I think social media is one of the worst things that's ever happened to people. And having been around for the advent of it, to see what Facebook began as and even where it is now, we used to just be people on those platforms and share the mundane and the boring. And it wasn't this weird race to be influential, and we didn't close ourselves off in bubbles. And like, so I mean, it's maybe not a conventional answer, but I hope like almost nothing is the same as it is right now. I hope we all go outside more. I hope we're all forced to like move more offline, because we realize we can't really trust all of these algorithms designed to make us hate each other. So I hope very little is the same, and there's very few things that I would plant a flag and say like, let's keep this, because not to be pessimistic, but I feel like the path we're on right now is like we're crash test dummies heading for a very, very big wall, and I think we need to back the car up.
I love it. That is an answer. Throw everything out almost. The baby with the bathwater. Because there needs to be kind of a reinventation or figuring out how to live with technology, to your point, because I don't think we'll ever go to those pre-Facebook days where people were, I love how you said that people could just be people on social, and that has definitely changed. I love that. Well, thank you, Joel. You really gave me, in a short amount of time, a lot of wisdom, both on marketing and life. So thank you for coming on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post it on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.